By the end of this video, you'll know the most important blues chord progression of all. We call it the 12-bar blues. This chord progression is the foundation of so much blues music, and you'll recognize it immediately. There are lots of variations and iterations on this chord progression, but right now we're just going to look at this in its most simplest form. You can play this pattern in any key, but we're going to look at it in the key of E. And we're going to just strip it down and play it in the simplest possible way so you can see the pattern as clearly as possible. Okay, I'm going to show you this just with downstrokes because I want it to be as easy as it can be for you to relate what's happening here on the guitar back to this 12-bar structure. We've got 4 beats in each bar. So to try and keep this really simple to follow, I'm just going to do 4 downstrokes on each bar. Okay, so I hope that's really clear. 4 downstrokes equals 4 beats, and in this context there's 4 beats in each bar, and in total it's going to add up to 12 bars. Really hard for me to play that without turning it into a blues shuffle, which is often how we present this, or at least that's often how I present it, but I wanted to just keep it in straight timing so you could see that. Okay, now remember, a bar is just a division of time. In America they tend to call them measures, I think. Certainly in the UK we call them bars, and what that means is it's a way that we divide up a section of music to split it into smaller parts. Now, for some reason, despite bar and measure being words that are used kind of interchangeably, this is always called 12-bar blues. I don't think I've ever heard it called 12-measure blues. I don't know why that is, just one of those little quirks of language. So what we're seeing when we talk about the 12-bar structure is 12 bars of music, and generally the way it's set up, of course it depends on what key you're in. For now we're in the key of E, is that you would play in E for 4 bars. Well, actually E7 is what I was playing, wasn't it? To make it more bluesy, I was playing it in sevenths, which we'll come on to later. I played 4 bars on the E, and then I played 2 bars on A7. Then I came back to the E for another 2 bars. Then I went to the B for 1 bar. Sorry. A, E, to the B. So the way I always try and explain this to my students is that that last part, you're just on everything for 1 bar. So it kind of builds momentum, doesn't it, this turnaround? It begins and it stays on the E for quite a while, 4 bars, then we go over to the A for 2, then we come back to the E for 2, and then we're changing every 1 bar. One of the reasons why this progression is so satisfying is because it starts off kind of steady, you feel like you know where you are, then we get some movement, and then you get this quick turnaround where we build up to the 5th chord in the key, which creates the tension, and then we come back to the 1st chord in the key, which is E. So that's the 12-bar blues pattern. I'm going to show you how to shuffle your blues progressions to sound way, way more bluesy. So let's look at how this compares to, if we're playing on the beat. So let's switch keys now. Let's switch and play in the key of A. Remember, we want you to be able to play the blues in all keys. And also it feels really different as you move around different keys. So we're going to play in A, and we're going to play on the beat for the first time around, and then we'll shuffle it. Okay, so let's give this a try. So that's quite a nice kind of, almost a poppy version, isn't it? It's a 12-bar blues progression, but to me it didn't feel that bluesy. It sounded more like a country song almost, or maybe a folk, kind of vibe. It didn't feel bluesy, and I think that's because we were strumming it in such a kind of steady way, and we were on the beat, and there was no shuffle or bluesiness in how the chords were voiced. I didn't play it as sevenths. Did you notice? I just played major chords, A major. Yeah, so it didn't feel that bluesy to me, to my ears. So we can instantly make that more bluesy if we shuffle it. Now when we shuffle it, instead of playing on the beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we swing the notes, so it goes like this. Now you'll notice I'm only playing the top part of the chord there. If I play the whole chord, it still sounds more bluesy, but to me it sounds much more moody if we only play the lower part of the chord. So essentially what we're playing is an A5 chord. I'm holding an A chord, but that string isn't being played. I'm just playing strings 5, 4 and 3. And can you hear how instantly it feels more bluesy than how we played it before? So I'll keep going around the progression. I'll do the same when I go to the D. I'm not playing the full chord. Back to the A. To the E, okay, can you feel how that timing is like 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2? We do a strum just before the beat, so we're not on it. We do a strum just before the beat and then on the beat. And it creates this shuffly feel. Okay, tip number 1 is use sevens. So don't just play major chords. Like if you're going to play D, don't just play a D major, turn it into a D7. It instantly sounds much more bluesy. If you can play bar chords, great, play them up here or here. And my favourite for playing those 7 shapes is to use a C7 shape, but move it further up the neck. So a C7 chord looks like this. It's a very cool shape to know because you can move it up 2 frets and it becomes a D7. You can also use that as an E7, 2 frets higher, and you can play all 6 strings. Super cool, big guitar chord. Love that version of E7. And of course it can be any other 7, an F7, a G7 and so on and so on. It's a nice chord to play because it's got 4 notes that you can play in there, and if it's the E you can play all 6 strings. So, and because it's the middle 4 strings on the guitar, it's a really nicely balanced chord voicing no matter what chord you're playing with it, because it's just got all of the mid-range, which I really like. Sometimes when you play this D7, for example, it's really thin and kind of weedy. If you play it there, it's got a completely different character to me, to my ears. So that's tip number 1. When you can, you don't want to overdo it. I don't think you always want to use 7s, but a lot of the time when you're playing blues, you need to be using 7s. It just heightens the bluesy feel of everything that you play. Okay, tip number 2 is learn the blues rundown. Now, I don't know if you know this one. I learned it years ago. It's very cool. It sounds like this. Yeah, so when you're playing in E, which we often are in blues, that's the rundown that you can use at any time, but usually at the end of a turnaround. And if you want to, I played it slow then. Let me show you it a bit faster. I'll try and play it with one finger so you can really see what's happening here. So I'm playing strings 1 and 2. You can alternate them, or just play them as a dyad in one go. And play the A string, and then you go back into your shuffle. But when you're at the end of that shuffle and you're trying to turn around, you would be on. It's really nice to play that instead. And just to make that sound even better, if you want to touch on this G note, it can spice it up a bit at the end, so it sounds like this. So there's just a couple of extra additions there that I think just act as a nice bit of garnish. So super slow. And then I touch the G and I notice how I bend it. Yeah, just bend it a little so it goes a little out of tune. Just gives it that slightly zany, you know, tortured kind of blues feel. And then I just touched on these two strings at the end just to give a counterpoint to those lower notes. You can go back into your shuffle. It's a really nice, like super bluesy, iconically bluesy turnaround that I think you just need to know. You don't want to overuse it, but at a certain point, if you're trying to represent a blues piece, you want to play something in a blues genre, if you include that, you're straight away, you're right in the heart of the blues using that. Very handy one to know. I don't know what it's called. I just called it the Blues Rundown. I don't know what its actual name is. Okay, tip number 3, and you actually saw me use it just before, is hammer on G notes. Whenever you're playing an E, G always sounds great. So if you're playing something like that. So let's say that you weren't playing a 12-bar pattern, but you were just playing something bluesy. Then those any G notes that you add in there are going to work. So I'll show you an example. See how I'm just hammering on that G? It always works. A great example of that is in something like Folsom Prison Blues, you know, the Johnny Cash track, is that there's loads of hammer-ons that are happening in there and lots of them are G notes. And just to finish that idea off, you can also use what would be the equivalent of G in other chords. So for example, if you were playing an A, then the equivalent of the G in the key of A is C. It would be here. Yeah, so it's 3 notes up from the root note of whatever the chord you're playing might be. In A, you can see it there in C. And that works in all keys. I'm going to share some really cool blues chord voicings with you. Now what these are, technically these are called chord extensions, and they're just like kind of, I don't know how you describe them really, advanced chords. Certainly some of them are advanced, but what they are is they're chords that are much more articulate because they have an extra note in them. So what that means is that it gives you more depth versus your sort of standard, you know, 7 chords that you would be using. So far we've looked at stuff like you know, an E7 chord, yeah, or an A7 chord, or a D7 chord, and we know there's many different ways you can play them, and they're very bluesy chords. But the interesting thing is the full name of those chords, they're dominant 7 chords. But there are other chords that sit within the sort of dominant chord family, and they're 9s, 11s and 13s. Some of this is pretty advanced, okay? So like if you're a beginner guitarist, like just stay well clear of all this stuff. Keep playing 7s, that's fine, that's all you need. But you could have a go at the 9s, because they're not super hard to play. The 11s and the 13s, I think it was just too hard for a beginner guitarist to play, but if you're an intermediate guitarist, you're going to love this stuff. Okay, so let's look at it now. Now, just to be clear, you can use these interchangeably with 7s. Anytime you see a 7 chord, you could also use a 9 or an 11 or a 13. The 11s don't always work, the 9s and the 13s tend to always work. But wherever you see a 7th chord, I want you to be thinking, no problem, I could substitute that out for a 9th if I wanted, or a 13th, or even an 11th, although the 11s don't always work as reliably as the 9s and the 13s. Okay, so a standard, let's look at, say, a standard D7 chord sounds like this. Yeah? Nice mid-range chord. If we turn that into a D9, it sounds like this. Can you hear how it's got a slightly different nature, but it's still got a bit of an edge? Yeah? So the way that we play nines is, the way I like to think of it, is it's kind of a bit like a C added 9 shape. If you picture a C added 9 shape, but then move, which you may know, that's quite a common chord, but then move those two fingers up. That's how we turn that into a 9 chord. So if we play those 4 strings in the middle, that's a C9 chord that we've played. Also, when I play them, I often squish those 3 down at the bottom, so it's like, can you hear how we get that nice tone there? So let's see how that would sound in a blues setting, okay? So we'll stay in it, we'll stay in the key of A. So I'm playing an A7, but in a minute I'm going to switch to a D9. Hear how that changes things? Now let's try an E9. So can you hear how the 9s gave it a different feel? I think they work really well. To me, that sounds a little bit more polished. Don't get me wrong, the 7s are great. They're your bread and butter, certainly as far as blues are concerned. But the 9s give it something else. I'm going to switch a bit more to more sort of intricate lead guitar, melodic bass stuff. And to begin with, what I wanted to do was just show you some really simple, lead guitar phrases and licks and riffs that you could play in an open chord setting. So later we'll come on to discussion of like actual, scales and patterns further up the neck. But to begin with, I thought it'd be useful to just have some really basic things that you can do to enhance the open progressions that you play. So basically this is like the simplest type of lead guitar stuff that we could do. So that seems like a good place to start. Here we go. I want to show you a really simple one. If you just literally just play the chords round for a 12-bar pattern again and again and again, then what happens is it gets a bit samey after a while, and you want something that can enhance what you play. So this is the perfect place to jump in and do that. So let's say we were playing a blues 12-bar progression, and we were playing in A. And what I want you to do here is instead of imagining that you're playing like that, like an A chord, just imagine you're just playing the top 2 notes of the A. Alright, so this is essentially an A5 chord that you're going to play. If you want to, you could just put one finger there. I find it easier to just put all of the fingers down. And then if you accidentally hit a string below, it's okay, because you'll still be holding that full A chord. The other option is to just play it with 2 fingers like this. Now this really matters because you're going to be playing this round quite a lot. But I think the best option is to do it like this, because that makes it easier to play the lead lines that we're going to add on top. So it sounds like this. So if we just play that round, yeah, you can see where we're going with this. Then we drop it down by 1 string, and we just carry on doing the exact same thing. Back to the A, and then we can go up to the E, down to the E, back to the A, finishing on the E. Yeah, so you can see all we're doing there is just hammering on 2 frets up. So the pattern stays, like the same. We just go from the A string down to the D, and back to the A, and up to the E, and so on. But the pattern stays exactly the same. Hope you can see that one. Super simple, I think, that one. We can enhance that and make it much more groovy, I think, if we add on the finger above, so it becomes like... You can almost play those notes in any order. So this is kind of like the blues boogie, isn't it? It's very similar. We're using the same notes, but the timing is slightly different. And I want you to feel free to explore different timings when you're playing this. You don't have to do it this way. The beauty, I think, of some of this blues stuff that we're discussing is it's kind of like a buffet that you choose what you want to use from. What we're doing is we're building up the different vocabulary of it, but you choose what the sentence is like. I'm just showing you what the different words are, if you know what I mean. You get to combine them in any way you want. What we're going to talk about in this video is a few different ways that you can play lead guitar over a blues turnaround. So essentially what we're going to speak about here is, I guess this is more advanced stuff, isn't it? We've covered off a lot of beginner stuff, you know, earlier on in this, some intermediate stuff. So this is more advanced stuff. Number one is variety. So when you're playing a lead guitar over a piece of music, I think the most important thing is variety. And that's in terms of the range of notes that you play, how low they are, how high they are. We want the dynamic range. Also, it's about the volume. Yeah, we want feel, expression. We don't want everything to be one-dimensional. We want quiet moments and loud moments. Yeah, we want it all. And also in terms of texture. So we want to hear, you know, a variety of ways that the music is presented. So range, volume, and texture. And this is really, I think, once you're becoming a more advanced guitarist, these are the things you start thinking about. In the early days, I was just happy just to play notes that didn't sound bad. That was my approach. In the very early days, I didn't know anything about keys or scales. I would just play notes and hope that they were going to work. Which, you know, I cringe off looking back on it now, but I remember it vividly. That was me for years. I had no idea about keys and scales and, you know, any of this stuff. So I just try stuff and see if it worked. But you don't need to do that, all right? Because you've got me guiding you, so you get the benefit of my years of sounding terrible. So that's what we're looking for. Variety in what you play. We don't want you to be a one-trick pony. So that's the overarching thing that we're going for here. And the other points I'm going to make to you here, hopefully they're going to help you provide that variety in what you play. So first of all, try and outline the changes. And what I mean by that is, if you know, don't just go up and down the scale. If you know that we're moving from A to D, then how's about you land a D note on the first beat of that D chord? I'll play a D note when we reach the D chord, and I'll play an E note when we reach the E chord, so you can hear how that sounds. Okay, so I whiffed on one of the notes there, but I'm sure you got the idea there. What I was trying to do was mark out the changes. The lead guitar I was playing was connected to the chords that was underneath. They weren't just over here whittling away doing stuff, being in tune. They were connected to the musical progression, to the chord, you know, the movement of chords that was happening there. I hope you've got a lot out of this video. You know, I mean, in reality, there's a couple of years worth of homework I've just given you there. And maybe you already know some of this stuff, but I know from experience that for a lot of our students, some of this stuff would just be like, wow, like really game-changing advice. So I hope that's been the case for you.